Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! This neighborhood holds memories to many shenanigans, but I thought this one would fit this up. A little bit of backstory to set this up. I grew up in a fairly large neighborhood back when having tons of neighborhood friends was still a thing. Our group was pretty large and at times was well over 10 people. We did everything together every single day. Now our group consisted of a bunch of oddballs. We had nerds, football players, chubby kids, super skinny kids, boys, girls, of various ages and so on. Being nice and wanting to have fun was the only requirement, and everything was going great. Anyway, the bully moved and we ride our bikes over to do our standard mass introduction. We invite him to play with us anytime and he takes us up on it immediately. The first day was slightly weird, but generally fine as far as first impressions go. Over the next week, though, we started to realize that he's an absolutely spoiled brat and a bully. Lost the game for anything, he would scream and start blaming people. He would push, call people names, and sometimes start crying over the most ridiculous things. Throwing fits every other day at least and going home mad as hell. He would start off fine but randomly escalate to insane levels. We went from some utopian society to having to break up fights and constantly diffusing situations. To make matters worse, his mom would always come chew us out after he went home and blame us for events that didn't even happen. He had her wrapped around his finger and she created a monster. This went on for about a week and then Bully had his best friend come stay for a few nights with him. Together they formed the ultimate piece of crap final boss. We were playing Foursquare and Bully got eliminated. He of course screams that he wasn't out to our ref and then shoves her down in the dirt. A friend ran over to help her up and Bully number 2 shoved him down and then threw dirt on a girl while calling her a stupid witch. I immediately told him to leave and that they weren't allowed to play with us anymore. They laughed and the bully said, "See ya tomorrow for a kickball." We knew they would most definitely come back just like he did every other day, so we held an emergency treehouse meeting. We always talked problems out and came to an agreement on things in our friend's treehouse. But this was definitely not something we were used to. We knew we had to get rid of them for good, so we hashed out our plan. The next day, me and my friend were playing basketball at his house. Sure enough, they come strolling up, asking why we weren't playing kickball. We told them everyone else would be there soon, but we just got Mortal Kombat, so we could go play it while we waited. Once we got upstairs, I grabbed the bully and pulled him into the room on the right, and my friend grabbed bully number 2 and pulled him into the room on the left. In each room was the rest of the group divided up, waiting. Once they were in a room, each person grabbed an arm or a leg and forced them into a chair where we tied them up. We removed the phones from the rooms and put Barney, VHS tapes, and the TV/VCR combos. These particular VCRs would rewind them automatically and play it again from the beginning every time it ended. This was a real torture to us for some reason. We knew the rope/chair situation would only last so long, so we tied their doorknobs together as well with a crap ton of jump ropes. They were in there for probably an hour, or approximately watching the same Barney VHS 3 times from start to finish, before they got out of the chair. I have to admit it was hilarious watching them try to get out of the room. The jump ropes had enough give to where they could open the door like an inch max. One would open it and the other would cause it to slam shut. They literally fought against each other for a bit. Thinking they had enough, we told them if they promised to never come back, we would let them out. The little crap said, "I'll do whatever I want. Now let me out." Sure, but see, the thing is, my friend's parents were both at work and wouldn't be home for many hours, so we kept them locked away for many hours. We all went downstairs and watched multiple movies, ate lunch, played video games, and even went outside for a bit. Eventually, it was time to let them out before any parents got home. We didn't think about this part, and we didn't really know what to do. So we did what any nervous kid would do and grabbed a bunch of random items to use as weapons in case they tried anything, but we let them out. We told them we were letting them out through the door and to back up. We opened the doors and they looked completely defeated, which kind of made me feel really bad for them. We told them they could go, and they just left without saying a word. At this point, panic kind of set in, as we really thought his mom was going to come over and tell our parents what happened. We'd all be grounded for a long time and we knew it. However, she never came, and they never bothered us again. My ex-husband Brian was/is a toxic, controlling narcissist. Classic case. Our divorce was very bitter, but I tried to be fair, splitting custody and giving him decision-making authority under the assumption that he would be a better father than he was a husband. Things went well for about a year. I got a new boyfriend who was great to both me and my kids and wanted to be involved in their life. When he found out my new boyfriend Tom was going to be attending my kids' fall festival at school, he went off the deep end. He abruptly decided he wasn't going to watch the kids while I worked anymore. He also refused to let my friends or family watch the kids and said he had to meet them first, but then would refuse to do so and claimed he would sue me for going against the custody agreement, since he had decision-making authority if I got a babysitter he didn't approve of. I lost 2 days at work scrambling to find any place available, which was difficult because of the school's location they attend. He began asking the kids to call him every night, which is fine. But if we were eating or busy doing something and I told him it would have to be later when they called, he would rage and threaten to sue me. He began asking me at all times where I was with the kids. One day I went into work for 3 hours to clean up some things I missed due to a storm. I left the kids with Tom since waking them up at 4:30 a.m. seemed needless, but when Brian found out, he raged and threatened to sue me. He threatened to apply for child support even though we split custody. He raged about every little thing. He didn't bring the kids to the Christmas school play because he knew Tom would be there. He fought me over medical appointments for the kids and refused to pay his share because he didn't agree to the appointment and of course would sue me. He wouldn't let me have the kids during his time, even to let them attend birthday parties or sleepovers with friends or family. Some things we had been doing for each other was no issue. This went on for about 2 months before I snapped. I hate when parents are willing to hurt their kids over their own egos. He kept threatening to take me to court and I was fed up with the empty threat. So first, I wanted to make sure he couldn't afford to fight me in court. Brian was on food stamps. I knew it was only because he was claiming to pay his ex-wife rent. She still owns half the house and he still owed her half the value. I sent his ex-wife a message asking her if she was getting rent from him and she said no. I sent that letter to DCF and they closed his food stamp card and sued him for fraud. Then his ex-wife turned around and sued him for her value of the house since he was claiming to have been paying her all along. Then I sued him to modify the custody agreement and take out all the things he was using to try and harass me. I had screenshots of every nasty thing he sent me. I had a letter typed by his lawyer stating he was looking for another job since I wasn't paying him and that's why he couldn't watch the kids. So if he tried to get child support, I could prove he was capable of finding more income. I had medical records and receipts showing I had paid for everything for the last year for the kids' health needs. I had records of things he said to the kids about me. I had pictures of them looking fancy when picking them up from his house. I had receipts of everything I had spent on the kids for the past year. He folded pretty quickly, cannot harass me anymore, and is still paying off his first ex-wife. I was a head lifeguard at a water park for 4 years, so I have definitely seen my fair share of entitled parents. The one entitled mother almost let her child drown because of it. At the park I work at, we have a bunch of slides, a wave pool, and one regular swimming pool that has these little plastic water slides that empty into it, that we also use for training. The shallow end is about 3 feet and the deep end is 10. But the water slides empty into the 4/5 feet end. A lot of people underestimate the depths, mostly parents and young children, and find themselves having to swim back to the wall instead of standing. I am only 5'2", so even I have to swim from that slide. Because of the depth, we require everyone under 4'8" to wear a life jacket no matter where they are in the pool. State law. As you can imagine, a lot of parents aren't happy with this, and though we have free life jackets as a courtesy, on very busy days we run out. But our biggest issues come from the parents who are convinced their child is the next Michael Phillips. On this particular day, it was fairly busy and I enlisted a couple of my lifeguards to look for life jackets that were left in the cabanas/bathrooms and so on, instead of hanging back up. A little kid came running to the pool and I noticed his height, about 2 inches too short. Poor little guy. Hey buddy, I'm so sorry but you can't swim in this pool without a life jacket. The entitled mother walking up behind him says, "Oh, it's alright, he can swim." I tell her, unfortunately because of the state law, I can't let him in the water without a life jacket. He's on the swim team. He's perfectly fine. I'm sorry ma'am, it's not our rule, it's the law. She rolls her eyes and huffs off, but manages to find her kid a life jacket, so I take my eyes off them and pay more attention to my zone. Regular irritated parent, no big deal. Fast forward about 10 minutes and I see this kid climb up the slide. It's the child, so I whistle at him and take him to his mother and again say, "Ma'am, I understand he can probably swim, but he cannot go down the slide or go in the pool without a life jacket." "Absolutely not. I am not putting that death trap back on my child." "I understand, but he can swim perfectly fine. He's on a swim team. He's fine." Me, beginning to get irritated, I tell her, "I legally cannot let your child touch that water if he does not have a life jacket on." "No, it was choking him. I will not have my child choking and dying. Goodbye." I almost cracked up, but she'd walked off, dragging her kid with her, so I rolled my eyes and didn't think anything of it. Every 20 to 3 minutes, we rotate positions as lifeguards to keep our eyes fresh and our energy up. So our lovely entitled mother decided to wait until we rotated to try and bring her child back. Unfortunately for her, I just moved to the other side of the pool. About 10 minutes into the rotation, I noticed a distressed swimmer, swimming but clearly struggling and barely moving. It's the stage before active drowning. About 5 feet from the slide, I whistle, jump in, yank the swimmer onto my tube, and lo and behold, it's the same child. Now I am mad, but not as mad as the entitled mother. She's sitting in a lounge chair on the side of the pool, not paying attention at all. Side note to the parents, lifeguards are not your babysitters. I help the kid out and drag him to his mother. I say, "Ma'am, this is the 3rd time I have tried to talk to you. Your child almost drowned in the pool because he..." The entitled mother, horrified, interrupts me. "Did you just touch my child?" "I rescued your child." "I did not give you permission to save my child. You have no right to touch him. You should have asked me first before just grabbing him like that." "I didn't see you anywhere. You were not watching your child, so I had to make a decision." "Yes, I was. He was swimming fine. How dare you save him just to prove your point? Just admit you're on a little lifeguard power trip. I want to speak to your supervisor." I love when people want to speak to a supervisor because at this water park, they are almost always on a lifeguard side. So my supervisor comes over. "This lifeguard won't let my child swim in the pool. She gave him a life jacket that was choking him and then dragged him out of the pool without my permission." The supervisor tells her, "Your child is too short." "But he's on a swim team. If he can't swim, he shouldn't have to wear one." Now, I've been having this same conversation over and over for about 45 minutes at this point. My supervisor asked her to give him a minute and move to the side to talk to me. Sometimes, if the children are near the correct height, we let them swim if there are no adequate life jackets and they seem like strong swimmers, and have a reliable adult with them. So my supervisor decides to extend his privilege to the entitled mother. Thank you. I can't believe it took this long for you to see sense. I hope she gets written up at the very least for ruining my son's day." "Ma'am, she was just doing her job. But I'm sorry if it made things difficult for you." The entitled mother goes back to chatting with her friends and her son runs happily back to the slide, where he nearly drowned once already, and he slides down it. And sure enough, he starts drowning. But I am not allowed to rescue her son, because he can swim, right? He's on a swim team. He's great. I'm actually about to jump in when my supervisor stops me and gets the mom's attention. "Ma'am, your son's drowning." The entitled mother rolling her eyes and walking over to the edge of the pool. "He's not. He's swimming fine." By this point, the son has moved from distressed swimming to active drowning. His mouth is bobbling up and down over the water. His eyes are wide, arms desperately grabbing for something, but he isn't moving anywhere. And no, none of the other patrons noticed because they were all doing their own thing, and drowning is very quiet and uneventful. Now, I'm getting antsy. I don't want a kid drowning on my watch, even if I don't have permission from the parent to rescue them. The entitled mother friends comes over to see what's going on, gets wide-eyed, and gasps. And the entitled mother falls into hysterics. "What are you doing? Don't just stand there. Do something to save him." Despite my current anger, I need no second bidding. I jump in, grab the poor kid for a second time, and pull him out. Supervisor says, "Please put a life jacket on him next time, or take him to the children's area where he can swim wherever he likes without one." Didn't even say thank you, just shoot me a dirty look, signed the incident report, and hauled her shivering child away. Edit 1. A lot of people are doubting the legitimacy of this story, which is fair. If someone is doing something illegal and life-threatening, law enforcement should be called. That being said, on a day when our relatively small water park is filled with 6,000 people, situations like this end up being the least of our concerns. As upsetting as it is, it was handled. The child was safe the entire time. He struggled for a bit, but he took in no water. He didn't slip below the surface of the water, and we sent him to a medic just to be safe. I've seen dozens of supervisors, lifeguards, and swim teachers do very similar things. If I kicked someone out of the park, which I cannot do, a supervisor or my manager has to do, every time they endangered someone, or even did something illegal and endangering, I wouldn't have time to actually ensure people don't drown, as crazy as that sounds. Anyway, the entitled mother didn't bother us again. The child will have learned to be more careful where he swims, and she didn't complain because she had no grounds to. Edit 2. I need to clarify some things. Legally, I had no right to jump in the second time if the parent told me no. It is similar to refusing medical assistance at a hospital. A lot of people are thinking I didn't jump because the parent was rude and I was being petty, but I didn't jump because 1. My supervisor told me not to, and 2. I was legally obligated not to. If I had jumped without the parent's permission, she could have sued the park and could have won. It's dumb, I agree, but we were technically following the law. I saved her child once, and then she explicitly told me not to save them again. And for the record, regardless of the law, I would have saved the child anyway, if it got to a certain point, and the entitled mother still hadn't given us permission. I don't care if my park gets sued or has to shut down, or I never get another job. I don't want someone's death on my hands. So I've got an acquaintance, Richard, who has always been of the I know better than you school of thought. What makes it worse is that he literally received his PhD in physics from one of my country's top universities about 6 months ago. So he's not a dummy. The problem is that he thinks that because he's a physics genius, that means he knows better than everyone about everything. Just an example, my kids are in Montessori schools. This is a decision my wife and I reached together, and we're very happy with it. When he heard, he went on a 30-minute rant/lecture about how we're throwing our money away, and Montessori is nonsense. When I told him that I had read and even professionally translated studies proving the opposite, and gave him some real-world examples, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Sergey Brin, Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, and so on, he still would not admit he might not be 100% correct. Not the subject of this revenge, but so you understand the person we're dealing with here. Another thing that's important to note is that Richard does not have Asperger's or anything similar. We joke about this all the time, and he's been tested from here until next week. He's just a really smart, socially oblivious pain in the butt. Given all of the above, I try to limit my time with him, but unfortunately, that isn't always possible. Last week we were both at the same group buy for a friend, Jack, who was visiting back home from overseas. I've known Jack since grad school, so we brought our families and made it more than just a long time no see type of thing. At some point later on in the afternoon, my eldest, Awesome, less than 10 years old, came to me really sad and said she wanted to go home. When I asked her why, she said that Richard had just spent 15 minutes telling her that she shouldn't eat hot dogs because they are unhealthy, and he explained what went into hot dogs and what they are made out of. Awesome is not a vegetarian, knows that the beef and chicken she eats used to be live animals, and has never professed interest in vegetarianism. At the same time, when a kid is eating a hot dog, they don't care or want to know what's inside. We spoke a bit, I calmed her down and I told her to ignore Richard and go play with her siblings and friends. Being a kid, she was thankfully easily distracted by something else and moved on. I didn't want to make a fuss with Jack or with Richard, so I just let it be. This turned out to be a mistake. About 30 minutes later, I heard Awesome scream and began crying. I ran over to her. Richard had come up to her and knocked her hot dog out of her hand, saying she shouldn't eat that garbage. I handed Awesome over to my wife for damage control and I took Richard aside and I told him that A, you don't ever talk to a man's kids without permission. B, you don't ever teach a man's kids without permission. And C, sure as hell, don't ever touch a man's kids without permission. He doesn't have kids, so I still wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. This turned out to be another mistake. Instead of doing the mature thing and moving on, he decided to double down on a hot dog issue. This was the hill he was going to die on. My kids shouldn't be eating hot dogs. Keeping Jack in mind, I disengaged and told him to stay away from my family. For the rest of the day, I kept my eye on him and he didn't come near them. Jack enjoyed it. We all ate some good meat. End of the story as far as I'm concerned. This turned out to be a third mistake. A few days later, we received a visit from a child protection officer who claimed that we were neglecting our kids, specifically Awesome. She came in and saw that while the house could have been cleaner, a house with kids is spotless. Everything was fine. She sat with Awesome for a few minutes and asked her some questions, said everything was fine, and she left. First thing I did was call a friend of mine who is a lawyer, just to be on a safe side. He said it looked to him like we were in the clear, but we should keep in touch with him just in case. Next, I began working the grapevine. It turned out that Richard had been offended by how I treated him after the hot dog incident, so he filed a false anonymous report. Being Richard and never thinking he could ever be wrong, he was even talking about it as if people should be proud of him for what he did there. I had to make sure though, so the last thing I did before dropping the hammer on him was confronting him personally. I set my phone to record and went to his house. He doubled down yet again, saying we were torturing Awesome. He's the one who called protective services on us, and he'd do it again in a heartbeat. This turned out to be a mistake. I am not the violent type, but I swear I wanted to break the son of a witch in half. I told him that if he came near myself or anyone in my family again, I'd have a restraining order put on him, and I'd make sure every single one of our shared acquaintances knew why. I listened to the recording in my car, and his admission that he filed a false report came out clear as day. I immediately forwarded to my lawyer, who said he will get the ball rolling with some friends of his, who is a public prosecutor, to see if he could get Richard in trouble, using this admission. Still waiting on that, the wheels of justice turn slowly sometimes. Then I enacted my actual revenge. See, after he got his PhD, Richard bragged about the new flat he'd be moving into as soon as he sold his current flat. To that end, he renovated most of his current flat, including putting in lots of new/expensive features that required lots of electrical work. He did the same on his new flat. He did most of the electrical work himself, which is a big no-no unless you're licensed. I called in an inspector on both of his flats, who asked to see certification on who did the electrical work. Obviously, there was no certification. It wouldn't surprise me if Richard, being Richard, he began arguing with the inspector that his work was good enough and he didn't need to pay someone else to do it for him. I haven't seen or spoken to Richard since, but I've heard that he had to bring in a certified electrician to examine every single change he made in both flats. This meant dismantling everything and having it inspected. Turns out the buyers of his old flats weren't happy with the delay in receiving the keys, and were even unhappier when they learned why there was a delay. They walked away from the deal and are taking him to court. Because his sale fell through, he is now in the hole paying mortgages on 2 flats. I don't know if there was a fine levied against him, but I sure as hell hope so. Listen to the story. You don't ever screw with a man's kids. Background and info. It was about 2 or 3 years ago. We were in high school. I, call me LG, was a junior. My brother Gangorix, was a freshman. We had 2 friends which will be called Puck and Bun. Our group was a group of outcasts. Puck was a scrawny nerd, Bun was a soft girl, Gangorix and I were, and still are, chunks. Like absolute units, round and soft. We all fell on the autism spectrum. We all were quite outside of our group and never were people for conflict. Gangorix especially is the sweetest of the group, hating getting into conflict and could be easily taken advantage of. Bun and Buck were in choir. Gangorix was in a marching band, playing the baritone saxophone. Like him, it is an absolute unit. Imagine a saxophone and making it big. Now imagine a kid about the size of this monstrous show marching on a field. He didn't show it, but the man is strong. This will be important later. I was and forever will be a selectively clueless jerk. I liked staying on schedule and I was a teacher's pet, the big sister and mom of the group in short. If anything happened around us, I'd either be hyperfixated on it or not know it happened. We all shared lunchtime that year, where we met at a tree to eat and talk smack about anything and everything. No one usually came here, so when two kids hereby known as Tweedledee and Tweedledummy sat near us, the story. Days here were normal. We sat down, waited for everyone to appear, and ate and talked. Knowing the times, we all talked about the recent horror game about a pizza place and robots. Enter Tweedledee and Tweedledummy. They stay at the other tree on a plot of grass with a loud Bluetooth speaker blasting vulgar music. Like any louder and it would shake glass. Like all annoyances, we tried to ignore it. I remember one day where I walked over and asked them to tone it down a bit as it was bothering us. They refused, continuing this for weeks. I went to turn my back to them, ignoring the noise they made. Little did I know, Gangorix was paying very close attention. The day of the revenge. It was normal for the most part. We met up and began to talk. The two idiots showed up to their tree and blasted music. It was 10 minutes of talking before Gangorix got up. He usually goes to the restroom at this time and thinks nothing of it. I continued eating. I only found out something was wrong when Puck and Bun's eyes widened and began to scream. Gangorix! LG, turn around! I turned to see Gangorix go into town on Tweedledummy. The kid was sitting and he was smacking him with the size of his fists. Tweedledee wasn't doing crap, but screaming in shock and fear. He hated conflict, so I could tell he didn't mean to draw blood or anything, but he was still hitting hard with his marching band. But as a group mom, I had to run and stop him. Gangorix, what the hell? He was crying when I pulled him off, crying. I thought he was just sick of the music and snapped. I was pulled out of class to write a report on the attack and Gangorix was suspended for 2 days. The truth of the attack. It's not often that my parents had to take us home, as we lived down the hill from our house. Usually we walked home with Bun and Buck, so they also thought he was in trouble. Gangorix told Mom about the attack and she praised him. He even got a special meal from Mickey D's for his actions. It was a week later when I found out what really happened from Mom. It turns out that day, the boys were making fun of me. They were calling me fat or a whale. Gangorix and I, like any Latino family members would, promised to stand up for each other. While I was blissfully unaware of their words, my brother heard every word and every single syllable they uttered. He beat Tweedledummy because he was protecting me. He was crying because he was angry at this guy for making fun of me. I felt bad for doubting my own brother for even a moment. Ever since that day, those boys never came back, and the vice principal came to us regularly to see if we were okay. A lot of kids at school became a bit nicer to me, as if they knew if they messed with me, they could get something worse from the small boy who was barely bigger than his saxophone. I wasn't messed with until senior year, where a few Redditors rated a video I made to call me fat. So I'm sure it had to do with Tweedledee and Tweedledummy, but it's fine. Just as long as Gangorix is with me, I have nothing to fear. Those marching band arms and legs will protect me. I promise you all, I will do the same for him. Flashback to 2014 or so. I moved out on my own in 2013 and moved into an old house converted into a 2-floor apartment directly across from my future in-laws. The downstairs neighbors were loud, blaring music at all hours. Yes, all of the hours, wouldn't cut the grass or take out the trash, on our shared schedule. Crabby neighbors, but never bothered me directly. The guy was pretty chill when sober. I would turn the music down a little when I texted him. He was okay until his girlfriend moved in. Now add shouting matches to the mix, and all of a sudden my requests to turn down the music makes him turn it up. I can barely walk on my super thin floor without her banging on the ceiling with a broom. I was okay since I'm a heavy sleeper and could sleep through anything. My wife moved in and I quickly found out that she's quite the opposite. Fan on turned on a certain angle in the doorway of the bathroom. The door closed halfway, blacked out curtains with them taped to the wall so zero light comes through. Zero sounds other than the fan. You get the idea. I told her that we can't expect him to remain silent when she is ready for bed. We need to be reasonable. But the wall rattling music needs to stop during the night. She hated it during the day, but I told her there is nothing we can do then. So she would go to her parents' house a lot during the day. I talked to the neighbor guy. He said, yeah man, that's cool, but it turns out the girlfriend wasn't having it. And his attitude then changed to, yeah well, it's our house so you can go screw yourself if you think you can tell us what to do, and you can move out if you don't like it. Something definitely had to change once she was pregnant and then a baby came. So I did the only thing I could do. I thought fire was fire and maliciously complied with the law to the T. I could only report them for noise after 11 p.m. and I now forgot the morning hour when the noise could start, but I believe it was 9 a.m. My dad has these huge old concert speakers in his garage. Professional grade, black leather bound, 5 feet tall and 3 feet wide, and a pretty nice vintage stereo/amp. He has two, but my apartment was so small I sadly only had room for one. We replaced our coffee table with this thing, laid face down onto our thin office carpet. Tired of his crap tunes, I tested this Geneva Convention break-in device when they weren't home. I had to take everything down from tables, counters, and shelves because they would shake off. I prepared audio files to feed the stereo. I was giddy like a kid with a new toy. I turned it on when I left for work and got my wife up to send her to her parents. I came home from work and hung out with her parents until it was close to bedtime. They resisted for 3 days, and on day 2, I found a pile of manure on my doorstep. But it didn't faze me. I cycled between sine, saw, square, waves, and clashing chords, marching music, Washington Post, march on loop, preaching clips, the most 2-bit songs you could think of, Captain Planet theme song, chicken dance, and so on. This poor old house rattled in ways I didn't think was possible. The vibrations from the sine wave would make your vision blur. I eventually got a text from him that read, "Sorry man, you can stop now." I did not. He needed a few more days to let it sink in. Plus I had so much fun putting it together. They complained to the police and the landlord. There was nothing they could do since I wasn't doing anything wrong. I didn't even hear music during the time of peace to follow. It was so quiet. They would build up their courage and try again every few weeks when I wasn't home. But my wife was. I then showed her how to tame the beast so she could let it loose while I was away.